When most people think of catechisms, they think of religious training tools. However, catechisms have been used for training in many subjects in our history. I was recently introduced to the Elementary Catechism on the Constitution of the United States by Arthur J. Stansbury. While I've not been through the entire catechism, what I have read showed me that this is an excellent teaching tool, not only for the young people whom it was intended to reach, but for adults and seniors as well. So we'll look at this catechism next on the Constitution Study.
Love the neighbors and have a few good friends. Every day we're everyday Americans. Oh, every day we're everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution, teach the rising generation be free. And I've been teaching and training people getting close to 3 decades. And I learned people learn in different ways. Some people are visual learners, some are auditory learners, some are optical learners. Some prefer stories, some prefer analytics. Well, some prefer catechisms. When I heard about this catechism, I kind of put it on my list of something I needed to look at, but didn't really have the time. And I finally got to it and said, wow, this is something I need to bring to you. One, because it may be something you can use to help learn about the Constitution or teach somebody else in your family or friends about the Constitution. It's something we shouldn't lose. So let's take some time, and I'll talk more about the website and all that other stuff at the end. But right now, let's take a look at this Catechism on the Constitution. We often bemoan the lack of a good education in civics in the Constitution the American education system provides. As I read Mr. Stansbury's catechism, I realized it's not a new phenomenon. Mr. Stansbury published his catechism in 1828, explaining in the preface that a people living under a free government which they have themselves originated should be well acquainted with the instrument which contains it needs not be proved. Yes, it should be obvious that a people living under a free government they created should have a more than passing acquaintance with the document that created it. Yet today in America, the Constitution is not taught in our primary education, our secondary education, or even in the higher education of law. Many people today believe that the Constitution is simply too difficult to read and understand without the higher education one obtains to be an attorney or a judge. Mr. Stansbury pointed out that this excuse would not be enough to justify our lack of education. Were the system indeed very cumbrous and extensive, running into minute detail and hard to be retained in the memory, even this would be no good reason why pains should not be taken to understand and to imprint it upon the mind. However, the Constitution is not a complicated document. It is not difficult to read. So what excuse do the American people have for being so ignorant of it? But when its principles are simple, its features plain and obvious, and its brevity surpassing all example, it is certainly a most reprehensible negligence to remain in ignorance of it. Are the American people negligent in our education? Based on what I've observed of those who discuss the Constitution at all, I'd have to say yes. Now, you may think that our constitutional literacy is a new phenomenon, but you would be wrong. A mere 40 years after its adoption, the citizens of this great country were generally ignorant of the Constitution. Yet how small a portion of the citizens of this republic have even a tolerable acquaintance with their own Constitution. It has appeared to the author of the following sheets that this culpable want of acquaintance with what is of such deep interest to us all is to be traced to the omission of an important part of what ought to be an American education, vis-a-vis the study of the civil institutions of our country. It seems our lack of education is not only a perennial problem, but a long-standing one as well. We prize them, it is true, and are quite enough in the habit of boasting about them. Would it not be well to teach their elements to those whose best inheritance they are? The American education system used to be the best in the world. People used to send their children to the United States, not just for a college education, but for a primary and secondary one as well. Now, the United States ranks number 13 in education worldwide. But it appears even when our education system was the envy of the world, what we taught our children about civics and the Constitution was still lacking. If a free country is our inheritance, should we not teach the elements that make it so to those who will inherit it from us. What can we do to improve this situation? Mr. Stansbury had an idea. Following work has been prepared with a view to such an experiment. It is written expressly for the use of boys, and it has been the aim and effort of the writer to bring down the subject completely to a level with their capacity to understand it. It's true that in 1827 such education was focused on boys, not girls. But the point here is that this catechism was designed for young people. It was not reserved to those who could afford a higher education, or even for those for whom secondary education was an expectation. This tool was written so the subject could be understood by 19th century boys. I would hope that Americans would be at least as capable of understanding the material today as they were almost 2 centuries ago. Whether he has succeeded, the trial must show. He has purportedly avoided all abstruse questions and has confined himself to a simple common sense explanation of each article. Mr. Stansbury avoided the more abstruse or difficult to understand questions, focusing on the basic common sense understanding of each part of the Constitution. That is yet another reason why our excuses for not being familiar with it rings hollow. It is very possible some inaccuracies may be discovered, and should this be the case, they shall be carefully corrected should the work be so far approved as to reach another edition. Mr. Stansbury, like us all, was human. That means it was possible for him to make mistakes. The fact that he recognized this and made accommodation for future corrections says a lot about both his character and our ability to trust what he is teaching. In the meantime, he cannot but indulge the hope that in laying this little offering upon the altar of our country, he has rendered her an acceptable service. This is another example of Mr. Stansbury's apparent humility. He sees this catechism as an offering made to his country, with the hope that his service is acceptable to her. Would the American people also make an offering to their country? An offering of time and effort to become acquainted with the Constitution? There are several ways in which we can educate ourselves and our children. I endeavored to create one of those when I wrote my book, The Constitution Study, back in 2020. Mr. Stansbury used another technique, a catechism. Now, most people think of catechism as a form of religious instruction. While many denominations use catechisms in their education, to catechize someone, according to Merriam-Webster's Online Dictionary, is to instruct systematically, especially by question, answer, and explanation and corrections. A catechism is a question and answer form of education. But why use a catechism to learn about the Constitution? For the same reason many early church leaders used them, to help people memorize important facts. As an educator, I learned early on that questions are powerful tools of the trade. We've all experienced questions when we've taken tests, but may not have realized their true power. When I was in high school, a teacher in a physics class asked a question. It was a yes or no question, meaning I had a 50-50 chance of getting it right. So I put my hand up. Now, when the teacher pointed to me, I gave my answer, which was correct. Then the teacher asked me a follow-up question. Why? I was caught. I didn't know why. I hadn't even thought about why. It just seemed to be the right answer, so I gave it. But now I'm being asked to prove my work. While I stood there struggling to figure out why, other students raised their hand to answer, but the teacher said, wait, give him a chance. In a minute or two, which seemed like forever for a teenage boy standing in front of a class, I gave my answer, and it too was correct. Here I am more than 40 years later, and I not only remember that class, but the lesson I learned, which had nothing to do with physics. Yes, questions can explore people's knowledge. This is what happened when my teacher asked the yes or no question. However, questions can also open us up to examine our answers, our assumptions, and the very basis for what we believe to be true. This was the power my teacher used when he asked me, why? Similarly, a catechism asks questions. Some of those questions are simple tests of knowledge, like when Mr. Stanton's Catechism of the Constitution asks, question, in what country do you live? Answer, in the United States of America. It is a simple test of a person's knowledge, of rote memorization, though a good catechism can do more. Why is this country called the United States? Because it is made up of a number of states, which were once separate, but afterwards agreed to unite together. What do you mean by a state? I mean any district of country where people are all under one government. By using a question and answer format, the Catechism is meant to educate the student. Something about that format also assists in memorization. I think the most powerful feature of Catechism is the personalization of the information. Sure, at first you are given the answer, but do you agree with it? Is there a point to be argued? Also, since catechisms generally go from simpler to more complex questions and answers, the student has the ability to build their knowledge not on the abstract, but in the context that has already been established in the catechism. Is some government necessary in every country? Certainly. Without it, nobody would be safe. Not only our property, but our lives would be in danger. Cannot all people of the country govern themselves? If every man was perfectly virtuous and knew what would be best for himself and others, they might. But this is far from being the case, and therefore, the people of every country are and must be governed. How is this done? Laws are made, which all must obey. Whoever disobeys them is punished. Do you see how idea is built upon idea, precept upon precept? That's one of the features of Mr. Stansbury Catechism that I find so beneficial. Now, I did not know about the elementary catechism on the Constitution of the United States when I was originally studying the document, yet I still find it helpful. Some of the questions forced me to examine my understanding of the Constitution and make sure I could justify my position. For example, one question is, who is to determine whether any law is contrary to the Constitution or not? The people themselves? No, but certain persons who they have appointed, called judges of the Supreme Court of the United States. This answer is only partially correct. No, the people themselves are not the arbiters of what is constitutional, but the justices of the Supreme Court have not been delegated that power either. But since the power is not prohibited by the Constitution of the states, they retain the power to determine if a law is contrary to the Constitution. People learn in different ways. Some prefer reading books while others watching videos. Some prefer more academic instruction while others like a more plain-spoken approach. Whether you are a new student of the Constitution or a long-time one, whether an attorney, judge, or just a plain, everyday American citizen, I recommend spending some time with the Elementary Catechism on the Constitution of the United States. As the supreme law of the land, from Article 6, Clause 2, it is very useful to know what trumps the acts of our government, or as Mr. Stansbury put it, that a people living under a free government which they have themselves created should be well acquainted with the instrument which contains it need not be proved. We claim to be living under a free government. Should we not be well acquainted with the Constitution that created it? What's the old saying? You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, this old dog learned a new trick, the trick of catechism, a structured form of question and answer designed to educate. I found this one and I wanted to share it with you. Now, if you want to find it, it's a Google book, so you can go to the website, constitutionstudy.com, look at the article, and you'll find links to the Google document. It's not the greatest scam, but you can at least read it. But it may be something we can use, something we can reproduce, something we can use as tools to help others to learn and study the Constitution. Sounds like a good idea to me. I mean, after all, the purpose of the Constitution study is to help people read and study the Constitution. Maybe a catechism is a good way for them to study and understand it. That's what we try to do here. So I send people to the Constitution Study website to learn, to ask me questions so I can give them answers. Seems like it works pretty well. While you're at the website, though, maybe check out the store. Maybe look at a book or a mug, something that helps support the work we're doing here. Maybe you just want to donate to the cause. I don't take a salary from all this. I pay for all of this. So anything you purchase, anything you can donate helps the cause and helps you put on more and more of these episodes. I'm also trying to do more and more in-person events, and they take time and money too. So again, check it out. You can also support me with your cell phone. Go to patriotmobile.com/constitution and join America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. You get great 3G, 4G, and 5G coverage, great customer support, good prices, and best of all, you're not supporting organizations that are attacking our rights, but ones that are supporting our rights, including the Constitution study. Maybe a catechism isn't for you. Well, check out The Miracle of America. Go to constitutionstudy.com/1776 study guide. I made a deal with the owner. You get a free lessons, 12 lessons that talk about the history, the foundations of what led to our founding fathers building the Constitution. And as I said, I made a deal with the owner. You get a free lesson. When you go to constitutionstudy.com/1776 study guide, that's the numerals 1776 study guide, you'll be taken to their website and offered a free lesson. Take the lesson, sign up, take the lesson. You can watch it in video, audio. There's a study guide that goes with it. If you like it and you want the rest of the course, it's just $17.76. Pretty good deal if you ask me. Whatever you decide to do, I hope you'll take this information and share it with others, friends, family, social media, wherever you can. That's how this word spreads. It's how you can support the work that we're doing here. You can also do that by coming back and joining us next time for the Constitution Study.